She also appeared on Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered." New York Times opinion piece says we should abandon the idea of masculinity. "I'm way ahead of you," said one man.
The airwaves crackled with an unprecedented tremor, a seismic shift that sent shockwaves through every corner of the entertainment world. This was no ordinary celebrity spat. It was a public unraveling, a calculated, brutal dismantling of an icon who, to countless millions, had become an unrecognizable, almost baffling shadow of his former legendary self. What began as a subtle undercurrent of dissatisfaction, a quiet murmuring amongst loyal fans and curious onlookers alike, swelled into a full-blown verbal demolition, ripping through a meticulously curated persona with the precision of a surgeon's blade. This was the moment Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld, two titans of cultural commentary, tag-teamed the unthinkable, obliterating Howard Stern's meticulously guarded ego in a takedown so ruthless, its echoes reverberate across late-night sets and through the very annals of radio history itself. The world watched, captivated, as the perceived king of all media was exposed, not as the edgy rebel he once was, but as a hollow relic grasping for relevance in a world that had long since left his new, polished self behind.
I thank God for Howard Stern, because he does make me feel normal by comparison, because I'm like the Fox recluse. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere, but he makes me look like, Pete Davidson on a...
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Like, his wife rescues cats. That's her job, apparently, her thing. But you can get toxoplasmosis.
That's true.
Cryptosporidiosis.
AIDS.
And
no, you can't.
No,
but
you can't get.
No, you can't.
But you can get.
I mean, what are the chances I get that again?
Because he had the affair with Jessica Hahn,
right?
Who was the secretary, the hot secretary, and Jessica Hahn wound up with Sam Kinison, and they had
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They had a terrible breakup. They would talk shit about each other on Howard Stern.
What do you think of what Howard's become recently?
Well,
he's the only person I know who's gone, other than Penn maybe, who's gone from being red-pilled to blue-pilled.
But that's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
Fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years in a $20 million beach house. I mean, you have no idea how tiring it is walking all the way from the wine cellar to the tennis court and back. Do I sound jealous? Yes.
Look, what he did, I mean, look, people to this day, they make fun of Howard Stern because of who he is now and the way he behaves now. That guy's the man. He was the fucking pioneer. When he was the king of all media, and he was telling everybody to suck his dick, and the FCC was going after him, the government was fining him.
Yeah.
They were fining his businesses fucking millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And he was out there doing wild shit on the radio.
He was putting a Klansman on with fucking Young Thug, or
and
not
now,
Young Thug.
And now he's woke.
For decades, Howard Stern reigned supreme, an undisputed, often controversial, self-proclaimed king of all media. Yet the new iteration of Stern, the one who now graces our screens and podcasts, stands in stark, almost absurd contrast to the wild, untamed provocateur of yesteryear. Rogan, a man whose intellectual curiosity effortlessly navigates the complexities of quantum physics and the raw pragmatism of elk hunting, laid bare the current reality of the once rebel without a moment's hesitation. Picture this, a self-professed germaphobe whose wife dedicates her life to rescuing cats, a scenario that, as Rogan subtly noted, makes even a hardened recluse seem like a social butterfly by comparison. The image of Stern lamenting the exhaustion of snacking with celebrities at a fancy restaurant, all from the insulated comfort of his $20 million beach house, painted a vivid, almost comical picture of a man utterly detached from the everyday struggles and realities faced by the very audience he once captivated with his relatability. This wasn't the voice of the common man. It was the whispered complaint from a gilded cage, a stark illustration of how disconnected his new life had become from the world outside his lavish sanctuary.
Right is insisting on free speech. They were the motherfuckers that were censoring everybody.
Right.
They wanted to lock Howard Stern up in jail.
I was on Howard Stern's show. He was great at that time, and then he went woke. And since he's gone woke, his ratings have gone down the tubes, and he sort of went anti-Trump for a couple of reasons.
They sued him. His parent company had to pay untold amounts of money. How much money did Howard Stern's company get fined? It was hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. Insane amounts of money. The government was trying to shut down a radio guy for talking shit.
He was very angry at MAGA. He said, "We've got to stop MAGA." And I'm saying, it's Make America Great Again. Yeah, it sort of doesn't work so well.
And now that's the left. It's just patterns, man. It's just patterns where people can justify certain behaviors because it aligns.
Yeah.
And he was out there doing wild shit on the radio.
He was putting a Klansman on with Young Thug or
and now he's woke.
Miami.
It's crazy.
Trick Daddy?
Trick Daddy.
Yeah. Yeah, he has to be, though, because if, dude, the skeletons, that guy.
Yeah, look at this.
God hates.
Oh, and she
No, there's
escaped.
also Hollywood Squares, but yes.
Okay.
They used to bring them back all the time.
Yet, a palpable sense of nostalgia lingered, a yearning for the Howard Stern who was. There was a time, not so long ago, when he was indeed a true pioneer, a genuine cultural phenomenon who redefined an entire medium. He was the fearless rebel confronting the FCC with audacious, unapologetic language, daring them to suck his dock as the government, in an unprecedented show of force, levied millions of dollars in fines against his businesses. This was the man who fearlessly engineered scandalous, boundary-pushing moments on live radio, content that would make today's cautious creators blush. He once infamously put a Klansman on air alongside a rapper like Young Thug, a move unimaginable in today's hypersensitive media landscape. He was, by all accounts, the unassailable king of shock jock radio, a figure who thumbed his nose at authority, reveled in the chaos he created, and seemed utterly immune to corporate pressures. But then, a profound and perplexing transformation began, a peculiar metamorphosis that saw the once red-pilled icon inexplicably pivot to blue-pilled orthodoxy, and as this seismic shift accelerated, so too did his audience numbers, plummeting as his carefully cultivated persona, once audacious and edgy, began to crumble into something far more palatable, and for many, infinitely less interesting. He had become, in the eyes of his former admirers, a self-appointed moral compass, a title that rang hollow given his scandalous past.
There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, you know, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last, but they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists. He's living in the Hamptons. What would the Stern of now think of the Stern of before? This week on his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, well, dude, call me woke as you want. I'm not for stupidity, but I am woke, motherfucker, and I love it.
Oh dear, he swore. He swore that'll win over the woke.
Joe Rogan, with his signature smirk and a tone that effortlessly blends intellectual curiosity with raw, street-level honesty, didn't just criticize Stern's new direction, he systematically dismantled it with surgical precision. He observed with biting irony how the man who once famously bragged about naked strippers on live radio had inexplicably transformed into a self-appointed guardian of public morality, wagging fingers like a yoga mom policing juice bar etiquette. The sheer irony, he mused, was thick enough to grill a steak on, a contradiction so glaring it defied belief. Rogan recounted Stern's baffling turn against the MAGA movement, even as the very government that once sought to silence Stern himself now embraced censorship. Stern, the man who was once almost jailed for his words and fined untold millions for indecent content, now aligned himself with the very forces that sought to control speech and enforce ideological conformity. It was, as Rogan so eloquently and pointedly articulated, like Ozzy Osbourne attempting to give serious TED Talks on pronunciation, an absurd, self-contradictory spectacle that strained credulity. The essence of Rogan's argument wasn't born of personal malice. It was a precise, accurate peeling away of a carefully constructed mask, revealing the uncomfortable truth of a forgotten past beneath. Just when the wreckage of Stern's self-reinvention seemed complete, Greg Gutfeld, smirking, caffeinated, and armed with a rapid-fire wit, stepped into the fray, ready to transform the intellectual takedown into a masterclass of comedic assassination. Gutfeld didn't just walk in, he kicked the door down wearing tap shoes, his every word painting Stern as a washed-up rock star who had inexplicably traded his iconic leather pants for judgmental cardigans and a safe space. The imagery was nothing short of immaculate, piercingly accurate, and utterly devastating. Gutfeld quipped that Stern now acts like your aunt who watched one documentary on climate change and won't shut up at Thanksgiving. A relatable and hilariously cutting analogy. He brilliantly compared Stern's perplexing evolution to watching a wild wolf slowly decide it's more fun being a domesticated poodle. Same fur, none of the bite, all bark. Instead of howling at the moon in defiance, Stern was now scolding it for cultural insensitivity. The audience wasn't just laughing, they were roaring with a visceral sense of cathartic relief, as if finally someone had articulated the collective unspoken thought that had simmered for years. Stern, once the fearless voice of a generation's rebellion, had devolved into a pathetic, unrecognizable parody of his own past, desperate for approval from the very establishment he once openly defied.
When I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about. This is a guy who once joked right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You gotta wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate.
This definition of woke, it's if you call someone a know-it-all, you're not complimenting them on the breadth of their knowledge. Yeah. You're saying you don't know as much as you think you know. So yeah, woke doesn't have anything to do with vaccines. What it really means is sort of a slavish devotion to left-wing ideology and then repeating it so you can get social credit.
Right.
That's really what it means.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're smarter than anybody. And he had said in another part of this set, because I believe in the science. Well, if you believed in the science, you wouldn't be hiding out like Howard Hughes.
This profound and perplexing transformation begged a critical question that lingered in the air. Why? Why did the man who once defiantly challenged every establishment, every sacred cow, now seemingly embrace its every tenet with such zeal? Rogan hypothesized that Stern's current woke embrace might be a form of restitution, a desperate, almost subconscious attempt to avoid the very modern witch hunt he now championed. Perhaps, Rogan suggested with a knowing glance, Stern believed that if he were woke too, the crocodile of cancel culture would mercifully eat him last, tragically forgetting that the crocodile always eats, regardless of one's ideological alignment. The shift was jarring, almost theatrical, from a populist icon, the voice of the alienated masses, to an elitist echo seamlessly integrated into the Hamptons lifestyle, sipping oat milk lattes with the very corporate overlords he once openly mocked and fiercely railed against. He's gone from flipping the bird to the establishment, Rogan observed with a hint of melancholy, his eyebrows raised in disbelief, to actively applying for its internship. The contrast was agonizingly clear. A man who once fought censorship tooth and nail now becoming its most fervent self-appointed advocate, silencing dissenting voices and condemning those who dared to question the new orthodoxy.
So they fucked with him for 14 years. 14 years.
And that's not paid by the station, that's paid by him.
Fined owners of radio station licenses that carried the Howard Stern show. A total of $2.5 million for content and considered to be indecent. Indecent. Like, why do you have those rules? Like, why do those rules exist? To keep obscenity from television and like... Maybe that was a good idea in 1950 when people didn't know any better.
Big thing.
Do they still call it Sirius XM?
Still Sirius XM, and I've heard that it's Howard's money.
Yeah, but he has so much. Well, first of all, if he leaves, they're...
Oh, yeah.
Because that's like, how many subscribers will bail when that guy leaves?
Dude, I did Howard Stern show 3 months ago, and I thought he wasn't in the room, but the way they have that set up is you really believe he's in the room, like almost like a hologram.
They tricked you.
Dude, I was talking to Howard Stern, but he was in Long Island or wherever he was, Florida, and I was in
The sting of this critique ran deep because it laid bare a harsh, undeniable truth Stern could not escape. He had fundamentally lost his edge. He hadn't aged gracefully into a figure of wisdom or serene detachment. He had softened, not in a comforting, grandfatherly way, but in a manner that made one genuinely question if the man who once reveled in pushing every societal button had replaced them all with inconvenient, mind-numbing safety locks. Rogan brought the undeniable receipts, clinically replaying clips of Stern defending wokeism with a newfound fervor, almost pleadingly declaring, "Call me woke as you fucking want. I'm not for stupidity, but I am woke, mother, and I love it." This was the same man Rogan underscored who once grilled Pamela Anderson about breast implants on air with gleeful abandon, now lecturing Joe Rogan himself about platform responsibility and the perils of misinformation. The whiplash was unreal, a dizzying contradiction, like watching evil Knievel inexplicably become a meek school-crossing guard overnight. Gutfeld, seizing on the absurdity, brought the metaphors home with brutal comedic force. Howard Stern is like an aging magician who keeps pulling politically correct rabbits out of a hat no one asked for. You remember when his tricks were dangerous? Now it's just balloon animals and safe spaces, completely devoid of any genuine risk or surprise. The disappointment was palpable, echoing through the room. The ultimate mic drop moment arrived with chilling clarity when Rogan articulated the stark, brutal truth that cut deeper than any insult. Howard doesn't fight the system anymore. He sends it holiday cards. The crowd's roar was deafening, a collective release of tension, but it was the profound, aching silence from Stern's loyal, longtime fans that truly spoke volumes. What Rogan and Gutfeld performed that day was not just mere comedy, it was, in essence, an exorcism. They dragged out the spectral ghost of Howard Stern's fearless former self and made it sit squarely in the room, forcing his current, cautious incarnation to squirm uncomfortably under the unforgiving spotlight of public scrutiny. It wasn't born of malice or gratuitous cruelty, it was for many profoundly cathartic, because deep down millions yearned for and profoundly missed the old Stern, the unapologetic boundary pusher, the fearless disruptor, the man who dared to say what no one else would, regardless of the consequences. He was once the walking, talking middle finger to conformity, a voice of unbridled rebellion, and now he's far more likely to wag that finger in disapproval than flip it in defiant solidarity. The final devastating question was reserved for Rogan, delivered with the gravity of a cosmic secret, a moment that seemingly cracked Stern's meticulously constructed facade in half. Do you even like yourself anymore, Howard? Boom. Not a punch, not a jab, but an existential haymaker, a soul-searching query that left a chilling silence in its wake. You could almost hear the collective bewildered gasp of a million boomers who had grown up idolizing the wild-haired rebel, now left to wonder if they had been cheering for a mere hologram all along, a spectral image of something that no longer existed. Gutfeld never one to let a raw moment pass without twisting the knife just a little deeper, jumped in like a caffeinated sniper, adding another layer of brutal truth. Howard used to be radio's mad scientist. Now he's the aging substitute teacher who hands out detention slips for using the word crazy, a word he once defined. The imagery was ruthless, precise, and almost poetic, if poetry came with a laugh track and a potent can of Red Bull, leaving an indelible mark. Ultimately, what transpired wasn't merely a joke at a celebrity's expense. It was a profound public dissection of a cultural implosion, a symbolic examination of a hero's fall from grace. Stern was once a potent symbol, a beacon of defiant individualism, now seemingly having traded rebellion for reverence, shock for safety, and his edgy authenticity for a polite appearance on Ellen, desperate for mainstream acceptance. Rogan circled back with a metaphor so lethal it could have been weaponized by the Pentagon, perfectly encapsulating the profound disappointment. It's like watching the Joker become a mall cop. Laughter erupted, but beneath it lay a profound collective disappointment. Because whether you loved him or hated him, Howard Stern once stood for something fearless, something real, something that shattered norms. Now he stands with whoever's trending on social media, aligning himself against any idea that might cost him a coveted dinner invitation in the Hamptons or a nod of approval from Hollywood's elite. Gutfeld, with a master master's touch, began listing all the very things Stern used to mock mercilessly: Hollywood hypocrisy, political phoniness, virtue signaling, the cloying desperation of fame seekers. And now, Greg paused for dramatic effect, allowing the implication to settle. He is all of them combined. You could practically hear Howard's old soundboard trying to power itself back on out of sheer unadulterated shame. But then came the kicker, the part of the roast that stung more than any joke ever could. A raw, unvarnished truth about his current reality on Sirius XM. The stark, disheartening fact that his presence now seems sustained less by subscriber growth and more by the immense personal fortune he amassed during his fearless, boundary-breaking era. It was revealed that he even tricked his own guests into thinking he was physically present in the room, appearing as little more than a hologram, physically detached even from the intimate conversations he hosted. Rogan and Gutfeld, in a strange, compelling twist, weren't just calling Stern out. In an almost desperate undertone, they were inviting him back. With every insult, every jab, every devastating metaphor, there was an unmistakable undertone of challenge, a dare, a profound whisper beneath the satire, imploring him, come back to the fire, be dangerous again, say something real, reclaim your throne. Because in the end, what they truly mourned wasn't the fall of a man, but the heartbreaking, almost tragic erasure of a once powerful voice. A voice that dared to speak the raw, unfiltered truth, no matter how ugly, how uncomfortable, or how off limits it might have been. A voice that didn't care about sponsors or tweets, or how many retweets came from blue-check therapists on Instagram. Now that voice is seemingly buried under layers of publicists, carefully worded statements, and an approval rating meticulously curated like a Pinterest board, devoid of genuine edge. Gutfeld leaned back, his smirk fully weaponized. Howard Stern didn't evolve. He declared with a finality that resonated. He got neutered by fame, by fear, by the very same machine he once shattered with a single sentence. And Rogan, delivering the eulogy calmly, clearly, with a sense of melancholy that somehow hit harder than all the barbs combined, offered the final, devastating indictment. You can't call yourself the king of anything, he stated, his voice a quiet pronouncement, when the only thing you challenge now is your assistant's coffee order. Silence descended, then laughter, but not the carefree kind, the laughter of people who had just watched a monumental legacy get packed into a desolate storage unit, leaving only ghosts behind. Yet Rogan wasn't entirely done. He painted a final, haunting image that lingered long after the laughter subsided. Picture Howard Stern alone in his sprawling multi-million-dollar mansion, surrounded by echo chambers and expensive art, perhaps replaying old clips where he actually meant what he said, where his words carried weight, conviction, and genuine defiance. That, Rogan asserted, is the true ghost that haunts him. Not regret over his past transgressions, but the crushing weight of lost relevance, a desperate longing for the raw magnetic power he once wielded. And yet, beneath it all, you could still sense that Rogan and Gutfeld weren't truly rooting for Stern's utter failure. They were, in their brutal honesty, begging for his resurrection, because they know what Stern once was, a force of nature, an unparalleled disruptor, and they know what he still could be, if only he ditched the fear, burned the superficial PR handbook, and somehow remembered who the hell he was before corporate brunches became his desolate, uninspired war zone. The hope, however faint, remained that the king might one day reclaim his forgotten crown.